We come here today to seek the comfort and support of this blessed community. Our 7 principles are, if not under direct attack, are under severe strain. Our belief in democracy and the worth and dignity of every human being is challenged on all sides. What better place to come to renew, recharge, and repair our souls? What better place to refresh our spirit for the challenges ahead? This place gives us hope. We light the chalice today with the words of Quinn Caldwell. If you came to this place expecting a tame story, you came to the wrong place. If you came for a story that does not threaten you, you came for a different story than the one we tell. If you came for a story of reversals that might end up reversing you, if you came for salvation and not safety, then, my friends, you are in the right place. Please turn to responsive reading 551, Earth, Teach Me. Earth, teach me stillness as the grasses are stilled with light. Earth, teach me caring as parents who secure their young. Earth, teach me limitation as the ant which crawls on the ground. Earth, teach me freedom as the eagle which soars in the sky. Earth, teach me resignation as the leaves which die in the fall. Earth, teach me regeneration as the seed which rises in spring. Earth, teach me to forget myself as melted snow forgets its life. Earth, teach me to remember kindness as dry fields sweet with rain.
It was supposed to be calm. We had a big day planned for blue sky and flat water. But when I went down to the beach to fill my water bottles for the day, a south breeze fetched a steady chop from the 2 miles between our island and the mainland. The intake tube of my water filtration pump jerked in the waves like a fish on the line, sucking air, not water, and wrapping itself around my legs. I swore at the lake. A half hour later, as I slipped the kayak into the still rough water, a big punishing wave slapped it broadside, filling the cockpit. Uh-oh. Instant karma. Should not have cursed at something so large and consequential as Lake Superior. Now, I know better than to think this way, but I was spooked. Was this a sign of what was to come? The lake is vast and dangerous. We were heading for miles of open water. Was the lake out to get me? Sometime later, as we took a break in a cove, I got a grip. The lake is vast. The lake is dangerous. The lake is powerful. My existence may be of consequence to the lake in as much as humans and the natural world interact, but in terms of intentionality, the lake has no plans for me. The lake has no motives. The lake isn't punishing. The lake isn't forgiving. The lake just is. I wrote this, or something similar to it, in 2006 in a column for the Ames Tribune in Ames, Iowa, where I worked as the editor there. It was a part of an account of a kayak trip of the summer of that year on Lake Superior. Many of you know, but many of you may not, because this congregation is growing blessedly. I worked for 24 years in journalism in Minnesota and Wisconsin and in Iowa. In 2008, 2 years after this kayak trip, as our two sons were off beginning lives of their own, my spouse got a job in a new city, and I had a chance to think about doing something completely different. We moved here to Rochester, where I landed a job working for the food co-op, and I joined this congregation, and I enrolled in seminary in New Brighton on the north side of the Twin Cities. And in the first semester there, for an assignment in sermon writing, I recalled this story from Lake Superior. Luke was in that class. Our time overlapped a bit in seminary. One of the great things about ministry is that you get to recycle your stuff. I have used this story countless times since then into my formation as a minister and then on into work in congregations. I used it here, in fact, in a sermon in July of 2010. Some of you may remember that as well. It has been a long time since I was in that kayak, but the story is a touchstone for me. It is the start of what has become my signature theological sermon. I have let it alone for a while, but I revisited it again just recently at my home congregation in Waukesha, Wisconsin, and on a guest visit back to Ames, and again as a guest in a congregation in Door County, Wisconsin. And I want to offer it again for you here today on this return visit, because even though this anecdote has been finely honed over the years, the story that follows each time is different. Which is to say that if this is my signature theological sermon, my theology keeps changing. How you of it. Even today, the version that you will get is not the same version as I preached in March in Waukesha or in Ames and in May in Door County, and definitely not the version that I wrote 9 years ago. Here, you never step in the same river twice or maybe the same lake, so here's a new adventure. The obvious point of the image, then and now, is that if God is like the lake, God is not a rule-minder or a judge, or even that God may have a plan for me or for you. This is not the God of predestination or judgment day. Definitely not the God of people who claim free speech as a shield against oppression. Not the God who elects people to office, not one who elected Donald Trump or Barack Obama either. You might think of this God as the old deists who founded this country did, as one who kicked the universe into motion and then sat back to see what happened. My spouse, Mary, and I went to see Peter Sagal from Wait, Don't Tell Me this last winter. And he told of his grandmother who believed in a God like this, a God who did not interfere in anyone's life, who did not even pay attention unless and until you were snarky. The minute you say something snarky, then God steps in to smite you. In a little more sophisticated way, I have used the image to illustrate what I understand as process theology, which holds that God and the cosmos interact, that they are kind of like co-creators in the totality of things, which rolls through time, sort of like a giant snowball, comprising everything that has gone before, and also, in a different way, everything that is still becoming, with God maybe as the connecting force that binds it all together, each part, including God, constantly affecting and being affected by everything else. This image works well with the ideas of pantheism and panentheism, and in a scientific understanding of spirituality expressed in writers like Chet Ramo or Sally McFagg. And all of this plays really well in seminary. They like it when you can work a metaphor. But with some overlap. I have been working in churches now for at least twice as long as I was in seminary, and my experiential learning has shaped who I am too. So a few things have changed since I first wrote this. First is maybe obvious. That is, that I have come to see humanism up close and personal. Humanism not so much as a course of study or a social trend, but as a lived reality here in community. I call myself a humanist in the sense of humanism that dominated the 20th century, humanism that is often paired with the term secular, humanism that gave rise to a generation of agnostics and atheists, and you might argue the growing trend of non-religious people today. That's who I am. No apologies. I think that even within Unitarian Universalism, the language of our worship, our shared ideas of spirituality, have begun to move beyond this view. I am not one who is uncomfortable speaking of God or of grace or circulating in religious circles, but I am skeptical of supernatural claims. I think that the project of finding meaning in our lives is a human project. I don't think of the Bible or as any other piece of literature as the inerrant Word of God, but I do think the truth can be found in many sources, including the Bible, a very beautiful source. All this is good. This is still what I believe. But the lake metaphor has a problem I have known since the start, and that is that the lake is really cold. Church life has taught me instead that what we do here is anything but cold. Here we celebrate birth and growth and commitment and relationships and death. We say that to live in hearts that love is not to die. Here we have hearts that love. Here we find community and connection, agitators who help remind us of who we are, who we might be, and we find comfort, too, a place of like minds and shared dreams, people with whom we share a common and an uncommon experience in being alive. As a tail-end baby boomer, I guessed early on in this career that it would be my job to bury the old humanists. A large generation, my generation, is moving on now into late life and death. I have felt that loss. I have seen lives completed, sometimes expected, sometimes unexpected, always profound, always powerful for those around. I have experienced personal loss, and this time too, the death of parents and siblings, failure in my own efforts, unrealized dreams. Religion is more than having a group of friends, but friends, community, love, these are a huge part of it. These experiences underscore the importance of community, the need we have for one another. This is where I often say I see God, in the connection, in the tie that binds. Whenever you have two things, you have three. You have the one, you have the other, and you have the relationship between them. I think that you can extend this even further into the world, into interconnection, especially this time of the year. You can see it in birds and animals and plants and rivers, the earth itself moving according to the rhythm of life. Ducks on the water with their head-bobbing courtship ritual. Ritual is a building block of religion. Who am I to say that dogs do not dream, do not in some way reflect on their own lives? So I think I have come to what UU professor and minister Bill Schultz calls a naturalistic humanism. The lake and humans do interact. As vast as it is, Lake Superior does in fact change with the vagaries of human endeavor. Witness climate change, or the hopes of some to build a giant drain pipe from the Great Lakes down to the arid Southwest. And so God too might ache from our transgressions. The lake image in its coldness is useful in pushing away an anthropomorphized and, I would say, idolatrous image of God. But the time I have spent in churches has taught me over and over and over that what we do here is all about humans and humanity and human-to-human connection. Humanism is about being human. The second thing I have come to know is that some big things should be cursed at. Some big things it is good and right to be angry with. Injustice, hate, fear. When I worked in journalism, I used to say I don't do bumper stickers, I don't do yard signs, and I don't sign petitions. It used to be that when I was young that if you saw a bumper sticker, it was some hippie in a Volkswagen. These days, if you see a car, or better yet, a pickup truck plastered with bumper stickers, you are likely to find a person angry at the world. Bumper stickers are like Facebook and Twitter. They give you the option of one-way communication, diatribe, not dialogue. Much of journalism has become bumper sticker reporting. It was important for me in that time when I worked in that job to hold out some neutrality. That doesn't happen so much anymore. We are not better off because of it. I am proud of my career in journalism. For performing a function so vital to our society, I grieve for what it has become. But ministry has helped me grow into another kind of relevance. I am compelled even more these days into the public square, and when I go there, I am in full possession of my conscience. There is a quote from Martin Luther King that applies to who we are as Unitarian Universalists these days, and maybe even to the squad in Washington. It says, "When you are right, you cannot be too radical." Speaking out is important. It is necessary. I notice a few bumper stickers in this parking lot. 2, some things we should be disturbed by, some things we should curse. Where I live, in a suburb of Milwaukee, the most racially segregated city in America, we feel the differences of race constantly. And even in my cloistered suburb, we understand that where we are lives in relationship to where everyone else is. Also, Waukesha, you may know, is one of the most conservative counties in the state of Wisconsin, but something like 12 to 13% of the population is Latino. It has been that way for 40 years or more. Immigration policy is the elephant in the room. At the same time that we learn of the horrendous conditions at the border, whole families 1,500 miles away live with the same fear, families that are built upon relationships that cross generations, cross borders. I think that you know this here in Rochester as well. I have been catching up on some newspapers in the last day or so. Love and work and children and grandchildren and dreams and lives thrive here as anywhere. And among them, documentation is a fluid thing because family also is fluid. You have many stories here too, I know, but one from my home. Earlier this year, near where I live, a Lutheran student pastor named Betty Rendon, who lived in Chicago and served a church in Racine, Wisconsin, was deported back to Colombia by Immigration's Customs Enforcement. Betty and her husband came here in 2004, 2 years before my kayak episode, seeking asylum from the corruption and violence of the cartels and the government of Colombia. Asylum was denied, primarily because Rendon could not provide paperwork documenting a threat to her life, paperwork which necessarily would have come from the government she was fleeing, and so, of course, was unavailable. But in that time, in that political time, the denial of citizenship for asylum seekers resulted in no consequences in this country. So they stayed. 15 years later, things have changed. ICE came with shock and awe, breaking down the door of their home while she was making breakfast. 20 agents with guns drawn dragged her off still in her pajamas. Hours later, when her daughter returned to the house, she found looters inside. ICE had left the house wide open. This woman who served a church, who was productive and peaceable, who lived a life much like mine, but also whose daughter was here under the Obama-era DREAM Act, a threat to no one, guns to her head, and no chance to change clothes, sped off to Colombia as fast as possible with only a few letters and her medications in her bag, no money, no cell phone, no way to finish what it is that she had been forced to leave, no way to begin what she now faces. We have learned in the time since then that she and her husband did arrive in Bogota with the help of a Good Samaritan. Her daughter and her granddaughter turned out in June for a demonstration at ICE offices in Milwaukee. Her bravery cannot change the fact that as a dreamer, she will never be able to leave this country. And as deportees, her parents, her daughter's grandparents, will never be able to return. As for us in this country, I reconnected just a month ago with an old friend who I learned has a sister whose husband is an ICE agent. The conversation made me stop again to consider the circumstances and the motivation behind the people who do this, who respond to the orders, who view their work as a kind of service too. I have no doubt that the execution of the arrest of Betty Rendon went according to policy. The officers were following procedure. But what kind of a nation are we whose policy creates, if not thugs, then thuggishness and fear and an unconscionable tacit assent to evil? This is something we should curse, something we should loathe. And I've learned that this also is about me. It is about my own tacit acceptance, my true willingness to enjoy the many things I am blessed with and turn away from the hate and the injustice in front of me. I do not think of myself as a racist or a sexist or prejudiced in any way, but racism and sexism and prejudice exist if I simply go to bed at night having done nothing to change them. Am I not complicit? The lake just is. But that does not mean that I do not have to work to change who I am, who we are, how we interact with the lake and all around. So we work in congregations like this one to increase our advocacy, to protest, to seek change. I want to be a hammer in the world as much as a rose. The third thing I've learned is more personal. It's patience. For most of my life, I have been a charge ahead, get things done kind of a guy. I don't stand on ceremony, and I often make things up as I go along, rather than to take the time to learn how it's done. Most of the time, this has served me pretty well. Sometimes it is not. Sometimes clever is not enough. Sometimes determination is not enough. Sometimes my ability to chat people up does not adequately prepare me for deeper conversation or to keep me from, unintentionally or not, hurting someone. Earth, teach me stillness and caring and to forget myself. I have used a line from the book of Matthew in connection with this sermon sometimes about the birds of the air who neither sow nor reap. I keep learning that I can change, that I can stick to some things even when they are not immediately gratifying, and after a while they pay off. I think that sowing and reaping are important. I have a sort of a yoga practice that is a small example. I am not a very good practicer, but I have kept at it more or less. For many years, I thought of myself as someone who just did not have the ability to stand on one leg. But then I set into some serious work at balance poses. And after many months, years, and a lot of falling over, I'm better at it now. But this applies to more than just holding a pose. We might think of this in terms of personal growth and dealing with addictions or relationships, or in terms of togetherness here in church growth, in living in community. In justice work, it is easy to feel like nothing changes, that all is for nothing. We make a change like legalizing same-sex marriage, and then a few years later, we pull the rug out underneath transgender people. The right to be who you are is threatened by someone else's insecurity. It is hard to carry the sign, to write the letter, to speak up at the school board meeting when the movement on the national stage seems to run on its own momentum. But I think of the reading by Marge Piercy in the back of your hymnal. Connections are made slowly. Sometimes they grow underground. You cannot tell always by looking what is happening. The choir director in my church told a story earlier this year about a 95-year-old musician from Spain who, when asked why he still practices every day, said, "Because I think I'm making progress." Carrying that sign, writing that letter, speaking out, this is how things change. Change is fundamental to who we are as UUs. If you do not like who you are, if you miss the mark, if you think you should be better, the good news is that you can change. Each new moment offers a new chance, a new life. Each new moment is salvation. It is like this in a kayak on Lake Superior, too. We are tiny paddlers making imperceptible headway on our journey toward the horizon. We are always thinking in terms of arriving or achieving, but the horizon is constantly receding. We will never get there. Even if we do reach the opposite shore, we look back and there is that horizon line again, now behind us and before us. The lake is vast. The lake is powerful. You can die on the lake or you can live, but the lake isn't punishing. The lake isn't forgiving. I think that if our idea of God was more like Lake Superior, we might better appreciate our dependence on each other and better appreciate the world in which we live. We might think that the stones we drop in the water carry ripples to the opposite shore. You can die on the lake or you can live. You might luck out and get a calm day, in which case you won't have to rely on much. On another day, it will take all of your intelligence and all of your skill to stay afloat, not to mention a little help from your friends. The lake is vast and dark and also really cold. The lake will lash you with Old Testament wrath and carry you off to distant shores on the gospel truth of its power. The lake is deep and beautiful. It teems with life beneath its waves, and it nourishes life along its shores. From it we draw our own lives, our livelihood, and maybe our sense of the divine. The lake will bear you up, and sooner or later it will swallow you down. The lake just is. I invite you to reach out, touch someone if you are comfortable, or place your hands to your chest, or greet one another as you will as we go off into our daily lives. I've kept you a little long today. I'm sorry, but you can't mow the lawn anyway. The grass is wet. The child who spoke up at the end of the story told us that one of the best things you can give someone is a reflection of their own lives. This is what you have done for me. I am so grateful for this congregation, for giving me the launch into this path toward ordination, and as I have said, into new worlds. In fact, this congregation also is going into new phases, new ideas, new identities, and conception of itself. It's blessed to be back here and to see you and to see how you have grown. I say to my congregation that when you go from this place, go in love, seek justice, find peace.